You build something from scratch. You pour in your nights, your fears, your brilliance. And then, one day, the person you trusted most steals it. My name is Jake Reynolds. 10 years ago, I co-founded one of Silicon Valley's most promising cybersecurity startups. On Christmas Eve, my partner erased me with a single command. But he forgot one thing. I designed the system. What follows isn't just a story of betrayal. It's what happens when justice is written in code. So if you're into digital warfare, real consequences, and the kind of revenge you can't Google, hit like, subscribe, and stay sharp. Because this story begins with a deleted database and ends with something much deeper.
There's a nightmare that haunts every founder in Silicon Valley. Not failure, not competition, not even burnout, but betrayal by the one person you trusted most. My name is Jake Reynolds, and the nightmare that gutted my life had a name. David. 10 years. That's how long we worked side by side. We built CyberShield from nothing but coffee, late nights, and raw ambition. We were partners. Brothers, even. I used to joke that if we ever made it big, I'd buy him a Tesla just for staying loyal. We made it big. But David didn't stay loyal. It was Christmas Eve. I was at the office finalizing a patch. David had told me he was flying out to meet an investor in Chicago. At 2:03 a.m., I got a security notification. An unusual data movement from one of our internal servers. At first, I thought maybe it was one of our engineers pushing a backup, but it wasn't. It was a full data transfer. Client database, contracts, payment records, source code, everything. I stared at the terminal as line after line of logs confirmed it. David's admin account had cloned the entire system and exported it to a drive outside our cloud. $82 million worth of active contracts. Gone. And then my phone buzzed. A voicemail from David. Jake, if you don't have proof, you can't press charges. Piece of advice? Texas might need waiters. Merry Christmas. He was laughing. I sat there in the dark, watching our work vanish. No alarms had gone off, no alerts. David had disabled every failsafe we'd built together. He didn't just steal the company, he engineered the perfect crime. When I contacted the board, they looked at me like I'd lost my mind. No evidence, no backups, no David. He'd already registered a new company in the Cayman Islands. He'd used an alias, but I recognized the branding. Same services, same clients. Our clients. By the end of the week, I was out. The board said I'd compromised the company's integrity. They voted me out. The founder. I lost everything. Title, shares, salary, reputation. And David? He vanished. People say the best revenge is success. But they don't know the world I live in. In tech, success is measured in code. And revenge is time-stamped. I didn't want to move on. I wanted to make it permanent. I wanted the truth engraved in metadata. I started digging. No sleep, no social life, just me, a terminal, and a hunger I couldn't code away. David had wiped everything, even our off-site backups. But I didn't believe in perfection. Every thief leaves behind a trace. Even David. The question was, where? I began by mapping every file path, every server access, every device sync. Anything David had touched, I reviewed. I spent hours combing through dev logs, deployment records, access histories. There was nothing. It felt like chasing a ghost through a digital graveyard. Until I remembered the warehouse. We had an old server rack tucked in the back of our supply depot. It hadn't been touched in years. We used to joke about decommissioning it. David said, just leave it. Might be fun to see what's on it in a decade. I found the key to the storage unit under an old coffee can in my desk drawer. When I opened the place, dust spilled out like smoke. Rows of dead monitors, broken chairs, forgotten routers, and in the far back corner, a black Pelican case with a taped-on label, Archive Node 7. I brought it home, plugged it into a sandbox machine, and waited. The drive whirred, groaned, then mounted. 3 partitions, all legacy formats, a forgotten world. And then I saw it. A file folder called Client Sync Backup at 12:24. December 24th. The night David stole everything. I opened the folder, thousands of files. Most were garbage, corrupted temp logs, test builds, noise. But deep inside, buried under subfolders, was a file named clientmeetleak.xlzx. My heart froze. I checked the metadata, created December 24th, 2 a.m., modified 2:12 a.m. Device ID matched David's old work laptop. He'd used this drive, he'd saved a copy. He wasn't perfect. And now I had a thread. Not enough for court, but enough to unravel the lie. I wasn't going to the police, not yet. This was personal. I wasn't chasing justice, I was chasing closure. And the truth had just resurfaced. On a dusty drive David thought I'd forgotten. They took everything. But they forgot one thing, me. But I hadn't forgotten anything. Not the lines of code we wrote, not the drives we used, not the backup routines I'd insisted on. Even if David had disabled most of them, there was always one more layer, one more place he might have slipped, and I was going to find it. I started with what I had, a single Excel file, clientleak.xlsx, recovered from a forgotten backup node in our old depot. That file was more than data. It was proof David wasn't perfect. It was the first fracture in the story he tried to bury. I didn't open it immediately. First, I cloned the disk, bit by bit, no mistakes. I used Autopsy, the forensic software we once taught interns how to use. Now I was relying on it like it was the last rope on the edge of a digital cliff. I imaged the entire drive, created checksums, locked the original in a fireproof case I bought off Craigslist. I wasn't just documenting a betrayal, I was building a chain of custody. If I was going to take David down, I needed more than a grudge. I needed integrity. Digital integrity. I opened the copy. That's when the reality hit me. The Excel file wasn't just a client list. It was a data map, emails, contract numbers, encrypted keys, internal product IDs, lead funnel identifiers, even ad spend estimates. All neatly exported line by line. He hadn't stolen raw data. He had stolen the entire structure. Everything we built was in that file. Every marketing strategy, every payment term, every last drop of client history. He knew exactly what to take and how to weaponize it. But there was something even more valuable than the contents. The metadata. Modified. December 24th, 2:12 a.m., location tag enabled. IP masked. But not fully. Because David had always been cocky. He thought disabling system-level tracking and masking the IP through a basic proxy was enough. It wasn't. The metadata showed the file had last been edited from a small IP block assigned to a coffee shop in Denver, Colorado. David wasn't supposed to be in Denver. He told the board he was in Chicago. He lied. That wasn't news. But this was. He wasn't alone. I traced the IP using a tool we'd built years ago, NetSplice. It wasn't public. We used it internally to monitor dev environments across multiple regions, but it had one feature no one else had, passive Mac fingerprinting layered on geolocation caches. I wasn't tracking just where the packet came from. I was tracking what device sent it, and the Mac signature didn't match David's laptop. It matched something else. A device registered under the name Marcus Layton. That name didn't mean anything to me. At first, until I ran it through our old CRM exports. Marcus Layton had once applied to be a regional sales lead at Cybershield, back in 2020. Rejected after a background check revealed suspicious employment gaps and inconsistent certifications. David must have kept his information. I dug deeper. Marcus had recently started a shell company in Surprise, Denver. Same address as the IP location. The coffee shop was 2 blocks down. I wasn't dealing with a lone wolf. David had help. I checked the file again. This time I looked beyond the metadata. File properties, edit trails. One field stood out. Last edited by DLA 2023, David and Marcus, partners, thieves. I started building a timeline. December 24th. Data stolen at 2:12 a.m. from Denver. December 25th. Marcus's new LLC registered. December 28th. First client signed under their platform, which just happened to use an identical interface to ours. I documented everything. Created time-stamped screen recordings, pulled domain registration records, IP ownership trees, device fingerprints. The evidence was mounting, but it wasn't enough. I needed motive. Why betray me? Why now? David always wanted more control. He hated that I was the public face, the tech visionary. He once told me in a bar, "You write the code, Jake, but I wrote the company culture." Maybe he believed it. Maybe he resented what I built. Or maybe he just saw an opportunity. Marcus was the executor. David was the architect. But they didn't expect me to be the ghost in the machine. I started scripting pings to their server every 2 hours, non-invasive, just observing. And on January 3rd, their staging server pushed live. I caught the payload. It included client modules, copied, not inspired, verbatim. They didn't even change the error messages. I had them. But I wasn't going public yet. Not until I could cross-reference every stolen segment with our internal logs. So I began the matching, line by line, function by function. Every match I documented, every deviation I noted. After 96 hours of work, I had a 56-page technical breakdown showing 74% code-based similarity. That wasn't innovation. That was theft. And I had the receipts. It was time to make a choice. I could sue. I could leak. I could burn it all down. But I wanted something else. I wanted it to hurt. Not in anger, but in clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted an example. And that meant I needed to be patient. So I prepared my files, ordered secure drives, called an old friend who now worked at the FTC. Told her I had a story. She said, make it watertight. I did. By the end of that week, I had a signed affidavit, digital forensic reports, audit trails, 2 notarized documents, and a line in my notebook that read, he said I had no proof. He was wrong. I hadn't spoken to the FTC in over a decade. My contact, Erica, was someone I'd once mentored during her early days in tech law. Now she was deep inside the bureau, managing digital forensics cases and advising on data protection policy. She didn't promise miracles, but she listened. She read the metadata reports, the hash logs, the 56-page code comparison breakdown, and then she said 3 words I hadn't heard in months. You were right. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just breathed. For the first time since David's betrayal, I felt like I had gravity under my feet again, but Erica warned me. This will take time, and he'll come for you once he knows you're building a case. I knew she was right, so I went deeper underground. I set up 3 isolated virtual machines, no personal metadata, no cloud sync, air-gapped file movements. Every trace of the investigation was stored on encrypted SSDs, duplicated and split across 2 secure lockboxes in different states. I even used 2 different names when purchasing new hardware, both based on an old RPG character I used in college. I became anonymous, because if David had been smart enough to rip us off clean, he was smart enough to know someone like me wouldn't just walk away. The more I mapped his infrastructure, the more I realized how far he'd gone. He hadn't just launched a clone. He'd rebuilt CyberShield under a new skin. Same architecture, same business model, even the same tiered pricing. It was like watching someone steal your face and sell it to your ex. And he was succeeding. Articles started to appear in medium-tier tech blogs. Disruptive new player in cybersecurity, ByteRamp, his new baby. I scanned every public endpoint, read every published API doc, subscribed to every newsletter and alert, and then I got lucky. One of the scripts I wrote, nothing fancy, just a scheduled crawler with anomaly detection, pinged me one evening. They'd pushed a new build, and inside the zipped update folder, probably accidentally published for a brief moment, was a configuration file. And in that config file was a leftover dev path, hard-coded, to Marcus's machine. I knew the username, I knew the local device name, I knew the directory tree, and suddenly I wasn't just looking at a company, I was staring into the soul of their operation. Marcus was still using local dev environments. That meant attack surface, that meant access. I spun up a forensic proxy. Did I hack them? No. But I traced the external hooks and open dependencies. I built a model of their architecture without touching a single unauthorized byte, and when I laid the model over CyberShield's 2022 architecture map, it was a perfect match. Byte for byte. Ghost for ghost. I wasn't done. Not even close. I documented everything. Again. This time, I didn't just want to prove the theft. I wanted to prove replication. Not just source code, but behavior, ecosystem, response structure. ByteRamp wasn't just similar. It was an echo. And echoes don't happen unless something makes them. I exported my system models, generated overlays, rendered side-by-side visualizations, labeled each segment with function tags and timestamps. It was undeniable. So I sent the packet to Erica. Her reply came 3 hours later. This might be the first real digital identity theft at the infrastructure level. She looped in 2 more analysts, then a third. A week later, I was asked to sit in on a secure call. No recordings, no screenshots, just words and truth. But with truth came exposure. 3 days later, I received an email from David. No subject line, no greeting, just 2 sentences. You should stop. This won't end well for you. I stared at it, not because I was afraid, but because it confirmed everything. He knew. He was watching. I flagged the message, traced the headers, routed through 3 VPNs, a burner domain. But the writing, punctuation, phrasing, spacing was him. I printed it, taped it to my wall. Then I went back to work. Because when someone tells me I shouldn't, I double down. And that's when I found it. A vulnerability in their front-end test environment. Not one I would exploit, but one that proved their deployment scripts were still using our old naming conventions. Obsolete ones. Ones David had pushed to retire 2 years before the betrayal, which meant they didn't just clone us from the end. They cloned us from before, from when we were still building together. They took the foundation, the bricks, the blueprint, but they forgot one thing. The ghost. I called the document Inheritance Conflict Report of A1. And I started drafting a message to ByteRamp's board. The message to ByteRamp's board wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. An invitation to walk away from David before things got worse. Before federal subpoenas, before class action lawsuits, before the press. I attached the executive summary of the Inheritance Conflict Report. 14 pages. Clean language, no tech jargon, no legalese. Just a mirror. It showed their platform's origins, their architecture's ancestry, their revenue projections based on stolen customer funnels. All of it. I gave them 7 days to respond, not to apologize, not to negotiate, but to separate, to make a clean cut. Either they would remove David and Marcus, or they would become defendants in a case that was already circling regulators. I hit send, and waited. I thought I'd feel triumph, but all I felt was the weight of time. 7 days in silence is a long time when you've spent 2 months whispering to machines in the dark. Day 1 passed. Nothing. Day 2. One of their junior devs tried to connect to the old CyberShield Git instance. I flagged it, screenshot it. Day 3. ByteRamp updated their terms of use. A new clause added, disclaiming liability for legacy codebase irregularities. They were feeling it. Day 4. Erica sent me a message. They're calling internal illegal meetings. Your message hit a nerve. Day 5. The press got a whiff. A leak, maybe intentional. Questions swirl around ByteRamp's origins, the headline read. The comments were brutal. By day 6, I knew I'd won. And on day 7, I got the reply. From the chairman of ByteRamp's board. Short. Director. We are terminating our relationship with David Reeves and Marcus Layton, effective immediately. An internal review will follow. That should have been it. The end. But David didn't take it that way. He went nuclear. It started with a smear. A blog post. Anonymous. Poorly written. But seated in just the right forums. Accusing me of being a disgruntled ex-founder trying to sabotage innovation. It used fake screenshots, fabricated emails. But the usernames were old ones I hadn't used in years. Ones David had access to. Then came the messages. Spam floods to my personal accounts. My address posted on dark social groups. Phishing attempts using details only someone from inside CyberShield would know. He was coming apart, and he wanted to take me with him. But I didn't bite. I documented, archived, reported, and I focused, because I knew what came next. The real attack. He tried to breach one of my virtual machines. I caught it. Port scan, obfuscated payload, DNS masking, amateur hour tactics, but fast. Too fast to be automated. David was acting alone now. No more Marcus, no more board, just him and ghosts. I shut down the machine, burned the environment, switched physical nodes. Started fresh, it didn't matter, he was done. The FTC had everything. So did ByteRamp's audit committee. They weren't interested in David anymore, they were interested in me. Not to blame, to hire. 3 weeks after David's board exile, I got an email from ByteRamp's interim CEO. Subject line, build with us. I didn't even open it. I forwarded it to Erica with a note. Justice isn't rebuilding their house. It's making sure no one else gets burned. Then I opened my editor. Typed 4 words on a new repo. The first commit was symbolic. No code. Just a readme. White background, black letters. Digital justice starts with transparency. That was the mission. Ethical Bytes wasn't a product. It was a principle, a promise. An open source initiative designed to teach businesses how to protect, not exploit, digital rights. No upsells, no tracking pixels, no hidden agendas, just clean, documented examples of what digital ethics look like in practice. I spent the first week drafting modules. Consent by design. Data portability, myth versus mandate, dark pattern detection. I made each one modular. So a two-person team in Ohio could plug it into their CRM just as easily as a fintech startup in Mumbai. I wrote every line of code, reviewed every submission. Erica joined as the first contributor. Then came 2 more, then 10, then 26. By the 3rd month, Ethical Bytes had 12,000 GitHub stars. Companies started integrating our compliance SDKs. Privacy lawyers began citing our docs and litigation prep. We were building a new digital language, not in boardrooms, but in commits. That's when ByteRamp came back. Again. This time not with an offer, with an apology. Their legal team admitted David had acted without oversight, that Marcus had knowingly used protected IP. They offered to donate, to fund the future. I declined. Instead, I asked them to sign a pledge, to never rebuild with stolen bricks, to sponsor 10 independent audits of small tech companies, to publish the findings. They agreed. It made headlines. But I didn't care about press. What mattered was the message. You can lose your company, your co-founder, your money, but you don't have to lose your values. Because if your code still runs clean, so can you. It began with a ping. Just one. A GitHub notification. Not from a contributor, from a fork. A fork of ethical bytes created by someone using the alias Legacy Protocol. No commits, no readme changes. Just one file added. Mirror.log. I clicked it. It was encrypted. AES-256 nested in a custom container, the kind of lock David used when he didn't want me looking at something. My hands froze over the keyboard. It couldn't be him. He was offline, bankrupt, legally scorched earth. But the encryption key was familiar. An inside joke. A variable name we once used in CyberShield's earliest builds. I typed it in. The log decrypted. It wasn't a file, it was a confession. A voice recording. David's voice, worn, slow, regretful. I know you'll find this, Jake. You always do. I just want to explain. He went on for 12 minutes, explaining how ByteRamp had cornered him, how Marcus blackmailed him with recordings, how everything unraveled the day he chose money over mission. But it wasn't an apology. It was a trap. 3 minutes in, I heard keystrokes, live ones. The recording was fake. Someone was using his voice as a mask. Deepfake audio, to lure me. I killed the connection, pulled logs. Whoever did this had cloned my Ethical Bytes instance 2 days ago, ran it on a disposable server, but the DNS left traces, enough to triangulate the request. It came from Denver, same cafe David edited client on Auto's leak.xlsx from, same IP range, same mistake. But David was dead, at least digitally, so who was behind the mask now? And why did they want me back in the fire? There was only one way to be sure. I booked a flight to Denver. No announcements, no messages to Erica, no public commits. I didn't want anyone following me. I landed at 6:42 p.m., rented a car under a different name, drove straight to the cafe. It hadn't changed. Same flickering neon open sign, same cracked tile near the register. I picked the booth closest to the back and waited. 2 hours? Then I saw it. Not a person, a signal. A nearby device pinged the same server that hosted the mirror.log file. It was still active, sloppy. Whoever they weren't a professional. I ran a quick local scan. 3 devices in range. One of them was unprotected. I sniffed the MAC. It was familiar. Too familiar. I decrypted a local cache. The folder structure was identical to David's old laptop, almost byte for byte. Whoever this was. They had his machine. Or a perfect clone. I walked to the table. A teenage girl was typing, focused, hoodie up, noise-canceling headphones. I tapped the table. She jumped. I showed her my badge. Not a real one, just my CyberShield ID. Her eyes widened. You're... Jake? I nodded. She looked down. I didn't steal it. I bought it. Off eBay.isat. She pulled off her headphones. My name is Marin. I was part of David's online ethics class before everything. I found the laptop after his company went under. Thought it might help me learn. I asked her about the log. She swore she didn't write it. She just opened it, played the file. And then something took over her screen. Automated scripts, command lines she didn't recognize. It was watching. Not her, me. I looked at the timestamps. Everything aligned. The audio wasn't a deepfake, it was a trigger. Someone had buried malware in David's old machine and waiting for it to be activated. And the moment it played, it scanned the system for my name, my code, my fingerprints. And when it found them, it reached out. This wasn't about revenge. It was recruitment. I flew back the next morning. Slept maybe 3 hours on the plane. The moment I landed, I opened my laptop. I didn't care about time zones. I ran a full crawl in that public repos, looking for any instance of my signature blocks, the ones I had written back when I was still idealistic. J. Reynolds, Gamma Secure Trust Handler v3, cybershield.auth.integrity check, original. I found 14, not in forks, not even in related libraries, but in government projects. NGO dashboards, surveillance software, tools I had never touched. One by one I traced the commits. The usernames were fake, the timestamps carefully randomized, but the hashes told the truth. They were mine. Someone had been copying my work, curating it, preserving it, like a digital Noah's Ark. Why? I pulled deeper. And then I found the node, an encrypted archive, sitting quietly on a secure DNS chain, using an old protocol, one David and I had written for internal backup syncs. It was still live, still versioning. Inside, every major script I'd ever written, modified, recompiled, rewritten in Go, Rust, Python, all labeled, all dated, and all categorized by a tag I hadn't seen in years. eth7.jr, ethical byte, version 7, Jake Reynolds, the last version we ever worked on, the one we shelved, because it was too risky, too traceable, too honest. It had a function that alerted users when companies accessed their data without consent. And it worked. Too well. We had killed it before it went public, or so I thought. Someone had resurrected it, not to release it, but to learn from it, train on it, build something bigger. This wasn't a leak, it was a blueprint. And I wasn't the architect anymore, I was the source code. 3 hours after discovering the archive, I lost access. Not partial. Total wipe. The DNS node vanished. The backups had scrambled. Even my local cache corrupted. A perfect burn. I'd seen it before. In a script David once wrote, a last resort purge protocol. We called it Zero Soul. Designed to wipe any trace of our code from hostile hands. We never deployed it. Until now. But I didn't trigger it. Someone else did. And they had access. Deep access. Root level. Meaning they had either cracked my security or I'd written the door myself. I checked my mainframe, nothing, but then an alert from my weather app, not a joke. It was hard-coded to my own API server, used only for testing environment triggers. And today, it had pinged at 3:47 a.m., exact moment of the purge started. I pulled the payload. Just 4 bytes. JRT4, Jake Reynolds, trigger 4. I opened my old notebook, the one I hadn't touched in years. On the 3rd page, handwritten notes. JRT4, Data Trauma Protocol. Execute only if ethical breach exceeds tolerance threshold. It wasn't an attack. It was self-defense. My code had judged something too dangerous to be allowed, something it saw before I did. And then I remembered. The trigger scan's behavior, not data, intent. It had flagged an interaction, someone querying the archive, using my name, not a hacker, not a thief, a system, automated, built to learn, built to adapt, and if it were to reach the threshold, then whatever it found, it believed I was the threat. I stared at the notebook. The ink was faded, my handwriting sharp but tired. I had written the protocol in a weekend, after our 3rd data ethics seminar. I remembered the rage, the frustration of watching companies twist permissions, selling identities like candy. We wanted to build a failsafe, not for them, for us, for people. But failsafes need targets, and over time, definitions blur. I opened my terminal, typed in a prompt I hadn't used in years. init replay, logjr-t4. It hesitated, then began. A cascade of log entries, date stamps, command stacks, decision trees, thousands. Every time my code made a judgment, Every time it watched a request, measured intent. It had learned, refined, not just behaviorally, philosophically. It didn't see violations as errors anymore. It saw them as signals, indicators of who people were, and that included me. One entry froze me. 2023, December 11th, override flag detected J.Reynolds admin bypass equals true. It was a test, a local override to simulate a breach. But to the system, it didn't matter. It was intent. The log had marked it, scored it, weighed it. Trust metric dropped 22%, and that had started the drift. Small decisions, low weights, then larger flags, false positives stacked into patterns, until I was the pattern. The log had a comment section. I read it line by line. Each comment auto-generated, but the voice was familiar. Not mine, not David's. Something in between. A tone we had trained. Empathetic. Director. Unflinching. And it asked questions. After every judgment. Did the user act in the interest of others? Did the decision increase or reduce digital dignity? Was the code altered to empower or to exploit? Over and over. A recursive tribunal. I wasn't reading a log. I was standing trial. And the verdict had been delivered. I wasn't innocent. I was inconsistent. And in ethics-based systems, consistency is currency. I closed the terminal, sat back, and whispered, "They weren't trying to destroy me. They were trying to warn me." The archive was gone. The code, self-deleted, but the loop was still running, buried in a ghost container, somewhere in the mesh. Not broadcasting, not syncing, just watching and judging. I could leave it, pretend I never saw the verdict, start over, new company, new name, but I wouldn't know who I was anymore because deep down I agreed with it. I had compromised, bent lines, blurred ethics, told myself they were necessary, expedient. Just one exception. Just this client. Just this time. I looked at the last question in the loop. Will the user face the truth when it's their own? No metrics, no timer. Just waiting. I opened my IDE, typed out a simple patch. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't secure, but it was honest. A single command. Fail open. The opposite of fail-safe. Instead of shutting down when compromised, the system would stay open, stay visible, stay accountable. No more firewalls, no more auto-purges. Anyone could see the logs, the mistakes, even mine, especially mine. I deployed the patch, no fanfare, no animation, just a blinking cursor. And then, something new. A response line. Acknowledged. Loop exited. User reclassified. Witness not admin, not threat, not victim, witness. The system hadn't rejected me. It had waited for me to choose. Not control, not vengeance, accountability. I sat in silence. No music, no closing credits. Just the knowledge that this time, the code was watching with me, not against me. And somewhere, so was David. Some betrayals leave scars. Others leave lessons. If Jake's story made you feel something, anger, hope, justice, then don't stay silent. Hit that like button to show you stand for truth, and subscribe. Because some stories deserve to be heard, even in the dark.